August 1931. A battered submarine surfaces through Arctic ice, its hull groaning under pressure it was never designed to withstand. Inside, Sir Hubert Wilkins realizes the diving rudder, the one piece of equipment that could save his crew, has vanished. Not broken, not damaged, vanished. Someone on his crew deliberately removed it, and they're trapped under the ice. This is the story of the most catastrophic polar expedition you've never heard of. A mission funded by America's most powerful newspaper mogul, sabotaged by its own crew, and commanded by a man who refused to admit defeat even as everything fell apart around him. The Nautilus expedition wasn't just a failure. It was a spectacular, violent, ruinously expensive disaster that destroyed careers, bankrupted its backers, and ended with a submarine being deliberately sunk off the coast of Norway to hide the evidence. And it all started with one man's obsession. Sir Hubert Wilkins wasn't just any explorer. By 1931, he'd already flown over the North Pole, survived multiple Antarctic expeditions, and earned a knighthood for his contributions to science. He was a legitimate hero. But heroes need new worlds to conquer, and Wilkins had his eyes on something no one had ever attempted: reaching the North Pole by submarine. Not just reaching it, studying it. Wilkins believed that understanding the Arctic Ocean beneath the ice could revolutionize weather prediction, unlock new shipping routes, and advance human knowledge in ways aviation never could. Flying over the pole told you nothing about what was happening underneath. He needed to get under the ice, stay there for weeks, and map the ocean floor. The scientific community thought he was delusional. The Navy said it was impossible. No one would fund a mission that had never been done because everyone assumed it couldn't be done. So Wilkins went to William Randolph Hearst, the most powerful media mogul in America. Hearst didn't care about science. He cared about circulation. A submarine to the North Pole? That was front page material for months, maybe years if something went catastrophically wrong. And Hearst understood something Wilkins didn't. Failure sold better than success. Hearst wrote the check with conditions. This wasn't a scientific mission anymore, it was a media event. Every day, Wilkins would send reports. Every discovery would be a Hearst exclusive. Wilkins hated the idea of turning exploration into entertainment, but he was broke. He signed the contract. He had his funding, now he just needed a submarine. The U.S. Navy had dozens of decommissioned submarines rotting in harbors after World War I. Wilkins bought one for $800. He named it Nautilus, after Jules Verne's fictional submarine. The irony would become apparent soon enough. The Nautilus was obsolete the day it was commissioned. It was slow, cramped, and had never been designed for ice. So Wilkins hired engineers to retrofit it with modifications that existed only in theory. Ice drills mounted on the hull to punch through pack ice from below, retractable sledge runners on top so the sub could travel upside down beneath the ice like an inverted sled, a reinforced conning tower to smash through pressure ridges. None of it had been tested. The ice drills were the biggest gamble they had to bore through. 6 feet of solid ice, but were made from experimental alloys never tested in Arctic temperatures. One engineer told Wilkins the drills had a 50% chance of working. Wilkins said that was good enough. He assembled a crew of 20 men. Some were experienced submariners, others were desperate for work during the Depression. Their captain, Sloan Dannenhauer, was a Navy veteran who took one look at the Nautilus and knew this mission was doomed. But he kept quiet. He needed the paycheck. In June 1931, the Nautilus left New York Harbor to international fanfare. Hearst's newspapers ran front-page stories. Crowds cheered. Newsreel cameras captured everything. Wilkins waved confidently from the conning tower, looking every bit the heroic explorer the public expected. None of them knew what was coming. The Nautilus almost sank before it even saw ice. 3 days into the Atlantic crossing, the main engine seized a catastrophic breakdown that left them drifting in open water. The chief engineer spent 18 hours in 100-degree heat trying to fix it. He got it running. 6 hours later, it failed again. This became the rhythm. Fix the engine, run for a day, watch it die, repeat. Then the storms hit. The Nautilus was designed to travel beneath the waves, not ride on top of them. Every swell sent the crew slamming into bulkheads. Seawater poured through poorly sealed hatches. The bilge pumps ran constantly. The smell below deck became unbearable. Diesel fuel, vomit, sweat, and seawater. Men started sleeping on deck because at least the air was breathable. The modifications were failing. The ice drills leaked hydraulic fluid. The sledge runners rusted. The reinforced conning tower developed stress fractures. The chief engineer found cracks running through welds that were supposed to be the strongest points. He reported this to Wilkins. Wilkins told him to patch it and keep moving. The crew fractured. Some refused to go below deck, convinced the sub would sink and trap them. Others talked about forcing Dannenhauer to abort. Captain Dannenhauer started drinking. You could smell it on his breath during inspections. Wilkins sent optimistic reports to Hearst. Weather rough, but spirits high. Expect to reach Arctic ice within 10 days. It was all lies. When they finally reached the Arctic ice pack in early August, the Nautilus was held together by luck and desperation. The engines wheezed black smoke, the hull leaked everywhere, half the crew was on the verge of collapse. That's when they discovered the diving rudder was gone. The diving rudder controlled the submarine's depth. Without it, the Nautilus couldn't dive safely or surface reliably. Any attempt to submerge would be a gamble with their lives. Wilkins inspected the damage himself, diving down in a suit to examine the stern. The bolts hadn't sheared off from stress or corroded away. They'd been removed. Carefully, deliberately. Someone had used tools to unbolt the diving rudder and let it sink into the Atlantic. This was sabotage. Wilkins called a meeting with senior crew. He didn't accuse anyone directly, but made it clear what he knew. Someone had deliberately crippled their mission, timing it perfectly far enough into the voyage that turning back would be humiliating, but not so deep into the Arctic that they'd all die. No one confessed, but Wilkins could see it in their faces. Some of them knew. Years later, Wilkins admitted he suspected multiple crew members conspired. They'd watched the ice drills fail during tests. They'd seen the hull crack under pressure. They'd heard the engineer's warnings. They realized that if Wilkins forced the Nautilus under the ice with faulty equipment, none of them would come back alive. So they made the choice for him. Wilkins faced a decision: turn back, admit defeat, and return to New York as the explorer who failed before reaching the ice. Hearst would pull funding. His reputation would be destroyed. The Nautilus would be a joke. Or he could keep going. The crew begged him to turn back. Dannenhauer, drunk and exhausted, told him they'd be lucky to make it back to Norway alive. Wilkins ignored them all. He ordered the Nautilus forward. Wilkins ordered the Nautilus to ram the ice. Without a diving rudder, he couldn't submerge conventionally. So he flooded the ballast tanks to make the submarine heavy, aimed the bow at a weak point in the ice, and ran the engines at full throttle. The Nautilus would force itself down through sheer momentum and weight. The crew thought he'd lost his mind. Even Dannenhauer said this was suicide. If the hull cracked, they'd flood in seconds. If they went too deep without depth control, they'd be crushed. If they got stuck under the ice, they'd suffocate. Wilkins didn't care. He'd come too far to turn back. They found a thinner section of ice. Wilkins gave the order. The engines roared. The Nautilus hit the ice with a sound like a car crash. The hull shuddered. Metal groaned. The submarine tilted at a steep angle, grinding down into the darkness. And then they were under, beneath the polar ice. For a moment, Wilkins felt vindicated. They were making history. Then the battery alarm went off. They had maybe 2 hours before they'd lose all power, lights, pumps, life support, everything. No problem, Wilkins thought. That's why we have the ice drills. Wilkins activated the drills. Nothing happened. The drill bits had corroded during the Atlantic crossing. The salt water and temperature changes destroyed the experimental alloy. When Wilkins tried to activate them, they shattered inside their housing. The drills were destroyed. Unrepairable. They were under the ice with no way to surface safely, no way to recharge batteries, and no way to get fresh air. Once the batteries died, they'd be drifting in total darkness with limited oxygen. Wilkins had one option: surface blind. He blew the ballast tanks. The Nautilus rose through the water faster and faster with no control. They hit the ice at full speed like a bomb going off. The reinforced conning tower punched through in a shower of ice and freezing water. The hull groaned. Rivets popped. Men were thrown against walls, But they broke through. They were alive, barely. The conning tower hatch was jammed. It took 20 minutes with crowbars to open it. Wilkins climbed out onto the ice to assess the damage. The Nautilus was wrecked. The hull was cracked everywhere. The conning tower was bent. The ice drills were destroyed. The engines barely ran. And the crew was finished, some crying, others just staring into space, too exhausted to react. Wilkins stood on the ice, looking at his broken submarine, and finally accepted the truth. The mission was over. The Nautilus limped back toward Norway at barely 5 knots. The crew was silent. Wilkins sent a final telegram to Hearst from Iceland. Mission unsuccessful. Equipment failures. Returning to Bergen. Hearst never responded. The funding stopped immediately. The newspapers that ran front-page stories about his departure buried news of his return on page 12, if they covered it at all. The Nautilus reached Bergen in late September. Wilkins claimed he'd repair it and try again next year. He gave interviews insisting the expedition proved the concept, even if execution failed. It was all desperation. 3 weeks later, the Nautilus was towed into deep water and deliberately scuttled. Officially, it was too damaged to repair, but the real reason? Leaving it intact would be a permanent reminder of his failure. The crew scattered. Danenhauer quit sailing entirely and never spoke about the Nautilus again. Wilkins spent the rest of his life trying to mount another polar submarine expedition. He wrote proposals, gave lectures, met with investors. No one would fund him. The Nautilus had destroyed his credibility. He died in 1958, largely forgotten. Most obituaries didn't even mention the Nautilus. But here's the thing, Wilkins wasn't wrong. He was just too early. In 1958, the same year Wilkins died, the USS Nautilus, a nuclear submarine named after his failed expedition, became the first vessel to reach the North Pole by traveling under the ice. It stayed submerged for days, mapped the ocean floor, and proved everything Wilkins had theorized in 1931. By the 1,970 nuclear submarines routinely dove beneath the Arctic ice. Everything Wilkins wanted to accomplish became routine. He was 30 years too early, and he trusted the wrong people. The Nautilus expedition remains one of the most ambitious, disastrous, and tragically overlooked missions in exploration history. A submarine that couldn't dive, a crew that sabotaged their own ship, and a man who refused to quit, even when quitting was the only sane option. Wilkins' failure paved the way for future successes, but he never lived to see it. If you found this story as unbelievable as I did, smash that like button and subscribe for more forgotten disasters from history. Drop a comment below. What other doomed expeditions should I cover next? The Franklin expedition? The Donner Party? Let me know. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.